Hey everyone, it's Nick Funch here on the Walk Around podcast. Super excited to bring you our first episode of 2020. Today we get to hear from McKenzie at the Intermark Group. Danny, what did Jake have to talk about?
So Jake talked about differentiating your dealership, the power of brand, and to bring more people into your store. I learned a lot. I thought it was super interesting.
Yeah, it's all it's almost scary to think about how much your psychology plays into your preferences, and I think Jake helps shed some light on what you should be thinking about as you try to capture more market share for your business. So take a listen, leave us some comments, and don't forget to check out our next episode. Super excited.
All right, it's a pleasure to have with us Jake McKenzie, President and CEO of Intermark Group. Thank you, Jake, for being here. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your background. What's your experience with automotive industry and particularly brand?
My background's in psychology. I majored in psychology, ended up getting a master's degree in Bale before I got my PhD. Went directly into marketing, kind of happenstance, and my first assignment was in automotive. I worked on the Chevrolet regional business, and we did that for a few years before they consolidated and took everything back to Detroit, and then we transitioned to Toyota. So I've been working with Toyota and specifically SET now for 99. This will be my 20th year. And so we obviously work in a lot of industries, been heavy automotive for a long time. And so, really enjoy working in the auto space, and you meet some great people and some interesting challenges.
So we wanted to talk to you today particularly about how a dealer can differentiate themselves. There's lots of competition, lots of competitive pressures, and your brand and the way you build loyalty with your customers is so important. So talk to us a little bit about, how that works for a dealer.
Oh man, I'm so glad you asked this question because it's kind of a passion area for me. So within a dealership, you've got two pressures. One is you're a small business and you want to build a long-term successful business. And the other is you've got to sell cars tomorrow and every month starts at zero. As you look at how people are compensated within a dealership, most of them are compensated on the latter sort of pressure. We got to sell cars tomorrow. And thus, everything is aligned to meet that goal, including marketing and advertising. So when you look at the marketing and advertising, it is, hey, we're running a sale. This is what's going on this month, et cetera. Thus, the messaging from pretty much every dealership out there, at least 90% plus, is we're the home of low prices, right?
Right.
Everybody is saying that. And that makes sense from those motivations. However, when you look long term, that is a very short term strategy. It actually hinders your margins long term because it forces you to recapture those customers every time they're in market. Whereas when you build a brand, you build loyalty long term, and it actually dramatically increases enterprise value over the long haul. But nobody's doing it because that's not how we are compensating or incentivizing people within the dealership. So the challenge is when everybody's saying we're the home of low prices, which you got 90% of dealerships, that's their positioning, that's the heart of their messaging. You know what consumers do? They ignore it because when everybody's saying the same thing, no one's saying anything, right? And as a result, people are tuning you out and they're beginning to shop solely off of price, which compresses margin even further and leads to churn and cross-shopping and all sorts of behaviors that we really don't want with consumers. And so that's the heart of the story. When dealers are willing to put a little time and energy into a brand, which is a point of differentiation, why you should shop with me versus somebody else, not only does it create long-term value, it will increase your success long-term. The problem is it doesn't show up next month because to build a brand takes longer than 30 days. And because it takes longer than 30 days, you get GMs and sales managers that are like, no, but I need traffic tomorrow. I need traffic next week. I got to hit my number this month. And so you got that balancing act that dealerships want to have.
And the other messaging that we see a lot, in addition to what you mentioned, low prices, it's not really from the angle of what's important to the customer. So you'll see things like largest inventory, or we'll beat the competitor down the street. It's not really anything that's hitting at the heart of what the consumer is interested in. Why do I care if you have the largest inventory? I'm just looking for a car that meets my needs. So how can dealers affect that differently and change their messaging to benefit what's in the consumer's best interest?
And that's a brilliant question, because that really gets to the heart of what a brand is. It's got to be relevant to what your consumers are. Even the folks who say largest inventory are making an effort at differentiation, at being different. Now, what you're saying to your consumer is you don't have to shop lots of places because we'll certainly have something that you need, come here. So that's better than saying home of low prices will be the lowest price. But all the other variations that you hear are variations off of the lowest price. We'll beat the lowest offer that you get, $100 guarantee, or, all the 1,000 variations of saying we have the lowest price. And so all those are the same. What I'd love to see more dealers doing is leaning into trying to answer why you should shop here, Mr. Consumer, Mrs. Consumer, and try to put themselves in the role of the shoes of the consumers. Because one thing that is fundamentally true is most people hate the car buying process. We see that in surveys and reports repeatedly. The OEMs are very concerned about that process. And that's something that people can differentiate on. And you can see very successful dealers that have shifted their marketing strategy into being a great process, enjoying the process of buying a car. Our customers keep coming back repeatedly and trying to make that implicit promise that the process is going to be better. And that's one way you can differentiate. And there are dozens and dozens of other ways that you can go about.
How do you define kind of the brand? Because I think back to what you were mentioning earlier, there is a lot of kind of masking or feeling better about, I'm defining a brand, but really that's just an undercurrent for price, right?
That's right.
Some of those things. So are there kind of questions a dealer should be asking themselves, or kind of looking in the mirror around, hey, what is my brand, and kind of how that's defined?
Good question. And this is the heart of, a place where agencies can often help, because it's sometimes difficult to distinguish your own brand because you're very focused internally. A variety of ways you can do it. You can, you're fundamentally trying to answer the question, why me?
Okay.
Why should you come shop with me? And answer it as if a consumer is asking that question. If you can't answer it super succinctly, then you haven't done a good job of differentiating yourself. And you can answer that question in lots of ways. It can be a very rational answer. And, going back to your example of largest inventory, that is a rational answer and a fair one. That is something you can claim that other people can't claim, that might be a reason somebody would shop you. Stronger answers are answers that appeal to the consumer and help fill their needs. The process you're going to love. There's a dealership out west that changed their positioning to being the stress-free car buying experience, and they aligned everything around it, including they set up this one chamber with an old car in it and a sledgehammer that you could go in and get your stresses out before you start buying a car. And so they've geared everything around, making the process stress-free, and they are killing it because they are saying something different.
I think as a brand, Lexus does a good job of referring to customers as guests. And, as a dealer, you want to carry that throughout their process as well.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the OEMs are very concerned about brand. They realize they're not trying to build a company for next month. They're trying to build a company that has value next year and 5 years from now. And you do that by building a brand. And that's how you build enterprise value. That's how you make your business dramatically more valuable. You got to have both. I realize you got to drive traffic the next day, but you got to have a brand message in there.
So it's interesting if I were to ask myself, why me? I'm a dealer, and I'm like, why me? And the answer is around price. Dealers are always struggling with margin compression, right? And there's no resolution to margin compression if your why me is around price, right?
Yeah.
Because there's no kind of stickiness or glue to kind of what you're saying. And so it's interesting if you're trying to solve for margin compression, but you're also advertising for the price, you're kind of making that hill higher or steeper or whatever that kind of looks for.
That's exactly right. Because you are instructing consumers to only care about price. And consumers don't really want price to be the primary driver of how they make decisions, but they will in a vacuum. They will if we give them no other choice. And that's where brand comes in. Brand begins to answer the question, why you, but without getting to the point of price. And a strong brand makes people price insensitive, even when it's a commoditized product. In a lot of my speeches, I use Tylenol as an example. It is a commodity. It has to be chemically identical to all the products on the shelf next to it. But the brand Tylenol has a 500% price premium. They've solved price compression in a commodity by establishing a brand. And that's what I want dealers to really understand. You want to build long-term value, you want to make more money on each sale, build a brand.
So let's say dealers have a good sense of their story and they answer the question, why me, effectively. What are some tactical ways that you can carry out your brand message to consumers? Is it social? Is it website? Is it all of the above? Talk to us some ways about how a dealer can deliver that message.
Right. First, I would encourage people to start looking internally. Make your brand real. It can't just be something that you say. It has to be ingrained in everything you do, the DNA of the dealership. So if you're saying that it's a stress-free buying experience, you have to do things on ground at the dealership to make it real.
So, practice what you preach.
Practice what you preach. This isn't just a marketing exercise. This is a business strategy exercise. Then once you've got that, just beat the drum. Everywhere you communicate, say that thing. It doesn't mean you don't talk about the sale going on or the deal or whatever, but you've got to have that as your lead component. So video is one of those powerful ways of getting it across because the brain processes video about 60,000 times faster than it does written information because we're hardwired for things that we see, obviously. And we've only developed written language a couple thousand years ago, so it's a relatively new phenomenon in human evolution. But everywhere it gets out there in social media, you want your customers repeating that mantra, not just what you post, but what they post. In the reviews that you're generating online, you want your customers repeating the thing that you have said to make it feel true. And then if you're going to spend any money at all on marketing, it's got to be in that message, whether it's TV, radio, outdoor, email, digital, what have you. You got to beat that drum so that if your name comes up, people immediately associate it with that one thing that you are differentiating on.
Yeah, it's interesting. And maybe a good place to start with the why me is your reviews, right? Your kind of positive reviews online. If you're struggling, it's like, where is there some commonality or thread between some of those that maybe gives you a head start or a jump start through some of that stuff?
That's exactly right. Because here's the reality. Everybody has a brand. They may just not know what it is.
Right.
Consumers will tell you what your current brand is if you ask them. If you go read your reviews, they'll tell you.
Right.
You may not like the answer, but I guarantee you they have a belief about who you are and where you fit in. If you like the answer, great, embrace it and run with it. That's who you are and can be differentiating. If you don't like the answer, decide what you want it to be and then gear your organization to reflect that thing.
Yeah.
What are some changes you're seeing in the way dealers are communicating their story? You mentioned TV, radio, digital, that evolves constantly. What are trends you're seeing in how dealers are communicating their messages?
Social's been the biggest change. When we began doing social media in the dealership space, everyone wanted to push the sales message. Hey, this is the sale we've got going on this week, and here's a specific vehicle that we've got a good deal on. Maybe it was something that had been on the lot for 90 days and we're looking to turn. And getting them to evolve to entertainment content, because nobody goes on social media to be hit with a sales message. People are on social media because they're looking to kill time and be entertained. And once successful dealers started entertaining their customers, having funny, humorous videos, that's when we begin seeing more traction. That's when you begin seeing people sharing effectively commercials online because they were funny or entertaining or lighthearted or something unique going on at the dealership. Sometimes they're very serious. They can be thought pieces about, the best way to select a vehicle or, something about the vehicle you may not know. But often they're just purely entertainment. They're funny and, extending a dealer's brand in that way. And so that's the big area that I think people are beginning to realize is an opportunity, because the thing with social media is you can have a paid component to it. I can pay to get that message in front of me, but if it's really compelling, people will share it on their own. And when you're sharing it on their own, there's no media cost, and so the ROI on that's insanely high.
Yes. How do you create content that can be shared organically a little bit, right? And I think it's through authenticity and having fun and real world, right? I think consumers can see through a lot of the sales clutter, right? If it sounds too good to be true, chances are kind of those antennas go up. But it's a different experience when you're kind of seeing real life.
Yeah. And, a lot of dealerships have somebody around that's naturally fun and thinks about fun, that is naturally creative, and those people ought to be in charge of that sort of messaging. And if you don't have it on staff, find an agency that thinks that way. It's hard to task somebody that's has a monthly sales quota to be in charge of fun.
Yeah.
Because they're worried about, I got to have traffic tomorrow. I got to have people in the month to make my number. And so be very aware of what you're asking out of those staff members and the alignment that they have in terms of their motivations.
So Jake, so a dealer says, hey, I get it. I need to kind of transition from less from price and more towards a brand and differentiate kind of my store, my dealership. Cascading that kind of message and that strategy through kind of the leadership within a store is inevitably challenging because the staff within the store is even more cyclical than the dealer, right? Comes back to what you talked about. How, what's kind of some best practices when it comes to kind of getting the team on board with kind of setting a brand and differentiating themselves? Do you have some thoughts there?
Yeah. So you got to start with the executive team, and that includes the owner, GM, sales managers, et cetera. They got to buy into what that positioning is going to be. Then you got to internalize it. So we talked about making it true, but it also has to be part of your HR process. So day one that somebody starts, what your brand is and how you're going to fulfill it down to an individual level has to be expressed. So you get a new receptionist. Got to talk to he or she about how they answer the phone that reflects the brand. As somebody walks into a dealership, how is the greeting that you're going to have be reflective of the brand? You truly have to work to integrate into everything you do. Again, this isn't just a marketing exercise. Marketing will be the big final piece, but if you don't make it real, if it doesn't start from the top and work its way down, and you make an effort to integrate into every person who works there, then it's not really a brand. It's just a marketing exercise. And, consumers have really, really good BS detectors. And if they think you're saying one thing and then not doing it, you're going to get burned. They're going to put it in the reviews. They're going to call you out online, et cetera.
So that's interesting. And Patty McCord wrote a book called Powerful. And as she talks about, you want to understand alignment within your company. And if there's misalignment, like as a leader, go ask your team what's important to the organization and how do I kind of align to that. And it's so interesting if you can define that differentiator, that brand. That's what you're saying, right? You need to cascade it to the lowest levels, and they need to be kind of talking about it and understanding all the time. So, communication, clarity, all of those things I think is critical, whether you're leading a team or selling a car or kind of all of the above. So, anything, Jake? Anything interesting you're reading right now?
So I've got 2 books I'm currently reading. One is All the Light You Cannot See. My wife is trying to read all of the Pulitzer winners. I'm reading that, so I'll have something fun to talk about. It's a brilliant book, kind of a page turner about World War II. And then I'm also reading Smarter, Faster, Better, rereading it, Charles Duhigg. And this will kind of reflect my nerddom, if you will. He observed that he felt like he was working all the time and didn't feel like he was moving the ball forward, but he knew this guy who was a doctor and on several boards and had written a book and always vacationing and coaching his kids' soccer team. He was like, how are you getting all this stuff done? So he decided to take a step back and research all of the existing academic research off of productivity. And he took it and organized it and wrote a book about it. And he was like, this is how productive people do it. And so it's great not only about personal productivity, but about corporate productivity, like how to get your organization more aligned to get more out of them. And it's, for me, it's a page turner, but it's research heavy and I'm really enjoying it.
Well, Jake, this has been great. I appreciate your time today. Tell us where our listeners can find you.
Great. Easiest place is at our website, intermarkgroup.com. You can also find us the same location on Facebook and LinkedIn and pretty much every social media platform. And if somebody wants to reach out to me personally, I am JakeM at intgroup.com.
Awesome. Well, again, we appreciate your time. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.